The importance of transcending the ego. Conventional and modern psychology focus its attention on the behavior of the ego, on the manifestations of the rational ego applicable to individuals and their communities. It does not study the true spirituality that resides in the higher self or SIMBRE of the human being, its evolutionary program that becomes the true holistic meaning of life. Usually, ego is conceptualized in the context of family and/or a business organization. Its dysfunctions, criminal extremes are not mentioned, such as the cases in our proposal to President Petro. This last vision corresponds better to focusing on the current situation of our social problems, which we have identified as serious spiritual poverty. Ego controls our attention only towards money, psychophysical well-being, or pleasure. Threats to the planet's ecosystem, human life, crime, threats of war, and other cases of great importance, such as the COVID pandemic. The blind spots of the ego intellectualize spirituality and even manipulate it for its purposes. Daniel Goleman reveals in his book, Vital Lies, Simple Truth, The Psychology of Self-Deception, that human ego creates filters at the individual and collective level in order to select information that suits its interests, to protect the body and the species as a means to maximize pleasure and avoid harm and suffering. It does so by ignoring with its blind spots valid and true information about reality. Even if it is unpleasant or not fun, the SIMBRE allows you to perceive with realism and objectivity true reality as it is. This would enable growth in the perfection of its naturally altruistic mental capacities, which lead towards truth, love, and righteousness. When the ego learns about spirituality through the filter of the ego, its fallacious focus on what we are convinces itself that I am a human being who can have divine experiences. Whereas, thanks to the SIMBRE of Teilhard de Chardin, the true holistic reality of the being that becomes aware of its evolutionary mind teaches spiritual intelligence, IES, that we must say, I am a spiritual being whose embodied consciousness has material experiences, agreeing with other experiences whose karmic lessons teach under the eyes of the SIMBRE how to perfect the consciousness capacity of the spiritual mind. We must emphasize again that when we are on the path of spirituality, the ego intellectualizes its spirituality. It even uses it for its egoic purposes. For this reason, there are many people who believe they are on the spiritual path. They limit themselves egoically and with greater priority as a means to preserve their health. They give more importance to physical well-being than to perfecting the growth of the mind without growing their SIMBRE. The ego advocates healing itself from ills, even by enriching its own reputation without karmic merit, by optimizing physical life conventionally or hedonistically. The ego is prone to diets, exercises, rituals, candles, essential oils, meditative practices, and even prayers are said without transcending the ego. To prolong physical health for the benefit of the SIMBRE, we must learn to transcend the ego with the SIMBRE by using productive reception in a progressive process of strengthening and enriching it. Mankind's greatest challenge is to transcend its rational ego. Ever since the beginning of human civilization to the present, this challenge has passed unnoticed by the majority of humanity, including scholars, intellectuals, enlightened people, leaders, and academics. The rational human ego has been the ruler of life, in the normal meaning that we have conventionally given to it in all the cultures of the world, its politics, its laws, and its leaders. Most of the time, it has been the human ego that has unconsciously fueled people's ambitions, from the normally egotistical child, the young lover, the household head, professional, business, institutional, social, or political. By possessing, dominating, conquering, and subjugating, as well as the traditional practice of building systemic thinking, also based on acquiring and defending rights and properties, by using ego-based measures and resources for all this. These manifestations of the rational ego have become essentially socio-economical and structural, and are the symptoms of what we have called spiritual poverty. This is our newest complaint, a serious and endogenous disease that affects the rich and poor all over the world, and that no public body, authority, mass media outlet, no academic or educational institution seem to notice. Historical experience has shown that without transcending the ego, all non-socio-political doctrines have been insufficient to eradicate spiritual poverty throughout the world. The Western system in which we live has been taking temporary measures in the face of these manifestations, and there are very few of them of a structural nature. Comprehensive holistic measures are conspicuous by their absence. That is the importance of the essence of the human being, which is his spiritual consciousness, is ignored. The ego hides our lack of ethics and the lack of absolute character morals. Thus, everything becomes relative. The world needs ethics and morals to be absolute in nature, so that they are universally accepted as universal referents to regulate our life in global society.